As I've been reflecting this past week on the Easter story, I've realized a couple of things that I want to share with you all today. So just glad to be with you. Then I want us to take an honest look. Like our sermon series right now is going to be the journey from the resurrection, this really just incredible, and you'll hear later in our panel, terrifying resurrection all the way to Pentecost and the new hope found there. So along that way, we're going to dive into the story of Thomas. But we'll get there, kind of journey with me, and here are some reflections. One, as I was reflecting on the Easter story, I realized that in order really for something to be born, for new life to be found, something must die. And that's what we were talking about with that story, that the crucifixion, you have to go through that process in the crucifixion to come out in the resurrection. Something must die. Something must be left behind. Something must be torn down. Something must be, in order to remodel a house, you have to tear some pieces apart, right? Like something, and kind of as it loops into our conversation today, something must be questioned. Something must be rethought. Something must die. The invitation of Jesus that he kind of gives and throughout the narrative is to follow him. Like I said last week, if you were with us, it's not to worship him. It's to follow him. It is to walk the same path as. This is what it means to be made in the image of God. This is what we are meant for. It's to walk that journey, and that journey goes through a crucifixion. And if we want to experience the fullness of the resurrection on the other side, we've got to also experience the fullness of the crucifixion. This week I was reading a book by a man named Peter Rollins. It's a beautiful book about doubt and about theology and about the Christian journey and really challenging parts of it. And he focuses in on this part that I really love when it focused in on Jesus on the cross and that part where he cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And it was in that moment that Jesus experienced the fullness of the abandonment and the loss of this relationship with God, this darkness, this lack, this longing. And Jesus before, kind of in the narrative, had never experienced that before. That was the moment. My God, I can't find you. Where are you? Why is this happening? What is going on? In the middle of that crucifixion experience. Now, the challenge is, as I reflected on it, that if we're invited into that, then we also at some point have to experience that same process if we're going to find new life on the other side. And maybe some of you already have experienced parts of that. Maybe as you kind of just take a breath in your couch or your chair or your computer table, maybe you have. You've experienced some profound loss, some profound grief, some profound darkness or moment where you also have cried, God, why have you forsaken me in this spot? Where are you? I can't find you. Why would this happen in all of these pieces? And in those moments, what we don't do is reflect that this is where the Jesus journey combines with ours. That Jesus has also felt that. Didn't cause it. Didn't be in the middle of it, didn't want that, but has felt it too. Oftentimes in our kind of theological understanding, we are not equipped for that moment. We've been told in different places, maybe by the way we grew up, maybe by our own theology, the way we view God, that it's not okay to cry out in that space. God, where are you? I can't find you. I don't see you. I'm not sure I believe in you anymore. You've forsaken me. You've left me. We don't celebrate that as a piece of our theology. We oftentimes condemn it and move it to the side. And I get why, as I've been kind of thinking about it and reflecting on it, it's just simply really scary. I think it's really scary when we come to the truth and the realization that God, the ultimate reality, the divine, the all kind of creator God, does not work for us. doesn't show up when we want God to show up, doesn't do what we want God to do. That when we come to this reality and the grips that God is not ours to control or ours to manipulate, is not a construct that I can have drop in when I don't like the way my life is going or I don't like the way the narrative is going. So God drops in and changes it. It's scary. It's scary when we come to a place where we doubt the faith that we grew up with, or we doubt the faith of our social group, or we have questions that we can't wrestle through. But all of our world has been constructed around this faith, like our family of origin. If we came out to our family of origin and said, I'm not sure I believe in God anymore, they would go through like a crisis or a panic. Or if we came out to our friends or our community group or our discipleship group or our kind of just relational connection and say, I'm not sure I believe in God anymore. I'm doubting where God is in this process for me. I just wonder how many of our community groups, our families, our small groups would be more like Job's friends. Who just, as Job is in the middle of doubting what could possibly be going on, Job's friends just remind him over and over again that he must have done something to deserve it. Or I just wonder. And I think it's scary, and I think that's why we don't go there. But at the same time, what I want to encourage us with today is that we have to. We have to go to those places. We have to go through the, my God, why have you forsaken me? We have to go through the places of darkness and doubt and question. And when the constructs begin to fall down, we have to go through deconstruction if we are to find the life that Jesus promised that we're meant for. Our worldview, our theology, and all of us have one, whether you are describe yourself as Christian, whether you call yourself Buddhist, atheist, agnostic, no matter which way you call it, there is a theology that you exist with. And by that I simply mean that the OGY at the end of the word means to study. Theo means God. Whatever system kind of you'd make decisions upon, or a system that how the world was created, how the world works, the ultimate reality, your theology matters, and it affects all this worldview. And here's what I want to say, especially to us as First Pres or wherever you're watching from, that our theology matters. And the minute that our theology, our worldview becomes static, we have begun to die. Your theology and your worldview must be evolving, must be growing, must be challenged, must be continually building upon all these different things. We must continue to wonder, and we must continue to be awed by the mystery of Jesus, and maybe wrestle with passages that we don't quite understand and they don't fit our context, and maybe they don't fit in a whole. We have to keep doing that work, because the minute that we stop now, when our faith becomes stagnant and becomes controlled in this box, we've actually made God in our image, and we've got to a place where we have it all under control. And our faith is dying in that moment. That's why it's critical to question, to doubt, and to walk through the, my God, why have you forsaken me? I think it's also, if we don't do that, it's where honesty dies. It's where honest, authentic faith dies. We have to admit we don't have all the answers, and we have to be okay with being wrong. One of the most powerful things that's happened to me along this subject is in the last kind of 4 years or 5 years since we've been recording these reflections, these sermons, is that I've gone back and I've watched some of them or listened to some of them, and you know what I've realized? I've realized how often I've been wrong. How often the things I preached about that I was so sure on and were so concrete, as I've learned and as I've grown and as I've read, I was wrong, fam. There's a lot that I was wrong about. And it's come for me along the ways. One of the major ways is that as I began to prepare for these reflections and these sermons, I began to read commentaries from different people, from our African-American brothers and sisters and our Latinx brothers and sisters and women and different theological spectrums. So you're not just reading from one voice. I've been reading from 5 or 6 or 7 voices. And when you do that, you realize they don't all agree. And it is scary, and it's hard because you want to have an answer. I just don't know if we always get all the answers. But because of that, my faith has become even more alive and even more broad and even more viable and even more honest. And I'm okay having conversations with people and being challenged by people. And like the reason one, just tangentially, is, do I have a relationship with God for what God can give me? Am I using God as my cosmic vending machine? Or am I engaging God because God is God? And I want to experience that. All of that has caused growth. And there's just so many tough questions that exist that we're not going to try and solve them. I just want to encourage you today to wrestle with them. Elie Wiesel, in his book Night, which is about the Holocaust experience, and again, it was kind of a book that was referenced in Peter Rollins' book, writes about this really some harrowing things as he experienced the Holocaust, but one of which was when the whole camp was forced to watch the hanging. And parents, if you're watching with your kids right now, I just want to give you a parent warning that the next part of the story is maybe not for all ears. So in that, they were walking by, and there was a young boy who was also hung on the gallows. And the young boy, as he's describing this story, was lighter than the men and the women. And so his death took longer, and they were all forced to watch. And in the middle of that, you heard this scream from the crowd of just lament of, where is God? Where are you, God? Why have you forsaken us in the middle of this? And it's the right question. It's the right question. It causes us to stumble. And oftentimes we don't want to look and see. And I mean stumble like in the just buckle our knees, not the typical Christianese sense. For that young man, that wasn't God's plan. That wasn't the way it was supposed to go. That's evil. Where was God in that? Where was this all-omniscient, all-loving, all-powerful, all-knowing God in the middle of that? Where's that all-omniscient, all-knowing, all-loving God in the middle of today when literally while you're watching this, kids will die of starvation and I will eat too much? Where is God in the middle of all of that? The doubt and the questions, what I want to encourage us with is the story of Thomas, that they are good. So let me read. The story of Thomas, I think that Thomas is one of the most courageous, beautiful figures we have in kind of the New Testament narrative. It's difficult, and it takes courage to admit that we're wrong, to admit we don't have answers, to admit we don't have it all together. It takes courage to do that. And for some of us, it could mean the loss of social group and community and village and different things. But it meant the same for Thomas. In John chapter 11, I think you can see the courage of Thomas. Jesus is going closer to Jerusalem, and Thomas is like, let's go die with him. And then in John 14, he's talking about where he's going to go, and I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and these different pieces. And Thomas is like, tell us where you're going so that we can come with you. And then you get this picture of Thomas. Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. This is after the resurrection. So the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. I have doubts. I have concerns. I have questions. I have all these different pieces. I will simply not believe. Now, a week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. And I wonder what happened in that week, if they really pressured Thomas, if Thomas felt ostracized, if Thomas's questions made him feel different. We don't get a chance to find out. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." And then he specifically went to Thomas. And in this beautiful interaction with Thomas, said, "Put your finger here, right here, in my side, Thomas. Reach out your hand." And in that moment, Jesus says to all of us, and not just Thomas, "I'm not afraid of your doubt. I'm not afraid of your questions." In fact, I think Jesus says to us, gives us the invitation to walk the path, and he knows that's part of it. And that honest, courageous faith has doubts and questions, and Jesus wants to meet us right in the middle of that. We've assembled a quick panel this morning. I want to just share with you some beautiful other thinkers around this subject. So let's hear from them.
Would Thomas drink whiskey or something else?
Well, I don't know. I don't think Thomas would take somebody else's word for whether whiskey was good. The guy who says, "Unless I can put my fingers there and touch those wounds," is going to say, "Unless you uncork that bottle and pour out a bit for me, I'm not going to believe you, brother." You know? So I think he's a very much try it and taste and see kind of guy.
Do you think it'd be fun to be around?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
I thought that's the doubter.
Well, in one of my poems, I call him. I say, courageous master of the awkward question. You know, doubting Thomas, father of my faith. You put your finger on the nub of things. You know, we cannot love some disembodied wraith, but flesh and blood must be our King of Kings. You know?
What is it about, you say, father of your faith? What is it about Thomas's story that stirs your imagination?
Well, first of all, I find it very convincing that there was a skeptic in the midst. You know, I think if this was a faked account of some guys in a committee trying to cook up a religion later, there's certain people they would have ironed out of the story. Thomas is one and Mary Magdalene is another. And I find both of them, in different ways, playing really key roles in the entire set of resurrection narratives. That doesn't look fake to me. I really love, and it seems to me like totally in keeping that when he's saying that when he wasn't there for the first appearance, so like Jesus was there, Thomas was not there. Then the next thing, he's talking with the guys and they all think Jesus is not there, but Thomas is, and he goes, "I need to touch the wounds." Then the next scene, Jesus is there and says, "Come on, Thomas, touch the wounds." And they should all be going, "Oh, wait a minute. So Jesus was there that time, we thought he wasn't there." So like, who's there and who isn't? There's an incredible thing going on there. But better still, I think it's absolutely typical of Jesus that he would both love and kind of tease Thomas enough to do that and to say, and then that double blessing, you know, blessed, good, well done, you believe. More blessed are those who believe without having seen. So like Jesus is already saying, you know, Thomas, this whole thing we've just done, you needed to do it, I'm glad to do it, but we were doing this for somebody else. And I am that somebody else. You know, I recognize that scene was played out for me.
How so?
Well, because I'm somebody who has not seen and yet believes. And I believe partly because I just see this extraordinary and unlikely collection of people, Peter and Thomas and James and John and Mary. I don't see any other scenario except the compelling presence of Jesus and the utterly unexpected and terrifying event of the resurrection as being the only thing that would hold such a bunch of people together. You know, I don't see them as people who are living, you know, to use an American term, they're not exactly in the same postcode area with each other, are they?
Beatner says that doubt is the ants in the pants of faith, and I have found that to be true. Doubt is sort of the mechanism by which faith evolves. Doubt is how you cultivate that posture of having an open hand. Doubt is what tells you that maybe this thing that you think is fundamental, that's non-negotiable, maybe it is. Maybe geocentrism is not central to the Christian faith. Maybe a young earth is not central to the Christian faith. So I'm grateful for doubt in my life because it has taught me that I can get some stuff wrong. I can be wrong, even in matters of faith. It's made me more humble, more dependent on Christ. So I'm grateful for doubt. It keeps my faith alive and thinking, and where certainty sort of just freezes it, you know. So yeah, I think doubt plays an important role in faith. I don't think it's the opposite of faith. I think it keeps faith awake, alive, thinking, movable, changeable. I just want to be yielded. I really do. I want, even as I've changed and I have new convictions, I want to stay open to the fact that I get stuff wrong, that the church has gotten stuff wrong in the past, and I want to have a tender, yielded heart that can change when I'm wrong. And I don't see how else to do that unless I have a healthy place for doubt and second thoughts in my life. It makes faith a little more challenging. It makes it a little harder sometimes, but I've found that it makes it more real. I'm not willing. I've heard from so many pastors who have told me, if you just take your emotions out of it, if you just take your intellectual struggles out of your faith, then you'll be a better, obedient Christian. I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to be a robot on this journey. I want to follow Jesus with my head and my heart fully engaged, alive, awake. That's a bigger risk. It's a bigger risk to stay engaged, but I'm not willing to be a Christian any other way. I don't know how to be a Christian any other way. And I don't think Jesus called me to be a Christian any other way.
I think that doubt is part of faith.
What? You think that doubt is part of faith?
I
That
think
thing kills faith.
I think that I think it takes quite a lot of faith to doubt, actually. I think it takes no faith at all to just assume, to take for granted what I've always been told, to just say yes, 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 and acknowledge it and go along there, and feel nice and secure in that. It takes quite a lot of faith to sort of question and step outside of the little box and be prepared to deconstruct a few things, to say, what if? What if I've got all this wrong, you know? I think I was talking to a very lovely atheist this week, actually. He came to an interfaith forum that I was taking part in, and he said that from his perspective, he thought that what religion does is sort of feed you wrong motives, because he said, you know, he thought the religious people live a particular way or make certain decisions because they think that way they're not going to go to hell, you know, they'll go to heaven and blah, blah, blah. Whereas he said, I just do them because I think they're right to do. And, you know, he's got a point there. He's got a point that I think if you know, motivation, because that's what people say, well, okay, so if you don't believe in these 6 things here, well, why don't you just, you know, murder people and well, actually, because that's not the sort of person I am. That's not how I think. You know, it's not because I'm going to get a reward or a damn good eternal smacking that I choose to live in a particular way, to not kind of cheat on my wife and, you know, rob people, you know, through defrauding taxes or whatever else it is. It's because actually this is the sort of person I think I ought to be. And I think that if at the end of the day, or let's put it like this, I think if it could be proven, which it can't, but if it could be proven beyond doubt right now that the entirety of my faith is a sham and has no reality behind it at all, I can't imagine wanting to live as a different type of person than I am now, because that's just seems like what human beings should be like, really. Now, my faith actually feeds into it enormously and gives me great inspiration and strength and courage to pursue being the sort of person that I want to be. But it has more to do with what I think about humanity. And I often say, that if we want to discover more divinity, we need more humanity. I think that's how I know God, in the depths of humanity, really, and what being truly human means.
What do you believe? I think it's such a great question to end on. And I also loved what Malcolm said about the unexpected and terrifying event of the resurrection. I want to share with you from this book by Peter Rollins, just as we kind of come to a finish with our conversation today, about Mother Teresa. And you may or may not know, Mother Teresa is an absolute just hero of mine for so many reasons. But you may or may not know that it's well documented, her doubt process for a significant portion of her life, even while she acted. And I'm not going to be able to say this better than the author, so I'm going to read, if you don't mind. And yet, in 2007, with the publication of some private correspondence between Mother Teresa and her spiritual directors, people were shocked to find that she lived beneath the shadow of a profound sense of God's absence. My God, why have you forsaken me? For instance, in a letter to Father Joseph Nierner, which is considered to be from April 1961, she wrote, "Now, Father, since 1950, this terrible sense of loss, this untold darkness, this loneliness, this continual longing for God, which gives me pain deep down in my heart. Darkness is such that I really don't see, neither with my mind nor with my reason, the place of my God in my soul is just blank. There is no God in me. When the pain of longing is so great, I just long and I long for God, and then it is that I feel He does not want me. God is not there. Sometimes I just hear my own heart cry out, my God, and nothing else comes." Now, Mother Teresa never stopped believing in God or the central tenets of the Christian faith. In all of her public addresses and private conversations, she made constant reference to those beliefs. The profound doubt she experienced was existential in nature. She experienced being cut off from God as a living presence, standing outside the world and guaranteeing that everything was in order. In this way, her life reflected the experience of Christ on the cross. The cry which addressed God while simultaneously testifying to experiencing the absence of God. Catch this part. And in this way, her belief was not a security blanket that helped her avoid a confrontation with the experience of unknowing. In this way, her belief, and so many of us have built up these beliefs as security blankets that helped her avoid a confrontation with the experience of unknowing, of questioning, of deconstruction, of doubt. When it comes to our faith and our belief, I want to read from Richard Rohr. Such an opening or a reopening. See, faith is our small but necessary yes to any new change or encounter. You normally have to let go of the old and go through a stage of unknowing or confusion or disorientation or what a dissonance or deconstruction, all those words, before you can move to another level of awareness or a new capacity. You have to let the security blanket go. You have to question. You have to doubt, and you have to walk through those pieces. People of great faith often suffer bouts of great doubt because they continue to grow. People of great faith often suffer bouts of great doubt. The opening up and letting go is largely what we mean by faith, and it explains why doubt and faith are correlative terms. They're the best of friends. Mother Teresa experienced decades of doubt. The very fact that the media and people in general were surprised by this experience demonstrates our limited experience of faith. What my hope is for us is that the people of First Pres, we would not have a limited experience of faith. We would not hold on to these security blankets. We would question. We would wrestle. We would be okay with the absence of God. We would ask, why, God, have you forsaken me? Where are you? We would say, like Thomas in all of his different ways, shapes, and forms, I need to meet Jesus. I need to have a moment with Jesus. I need to do the work in that. We have such need to unknow, need to question, need to deconstruct, and need to let some things die or change. And I know that's so scary and so hard. And so I'm praying for the courage in that. One of the last pieces, and there's multiple pieces I loved in this book by Peter Rollins, but one of them was this, is how does he respond to the question, what do you believe? Or do you believe? And his answer is, I'm trying to believe. Maybe in a way from the narrative, Lord, help my unbelief in these moments. And then maybe he says it better as we finish kind of this conversation and this reflection, that he says, maybe the best way for you to check whether or not I believe is for you to ask my friends, my community, or maybe even better, ask my enemies. See, like Mother Teresa, our beliefs are bailed out in our actions. People can tell and look at us the way we believe by the way we act. Maybe for me, it's the best. Like, if you ask my kids, do I believe in God? Do I believe that Jesus was who he said he was? Maybe you should ask my kids. Maybe you should ask my wife and see what actions are taking place. Dallas Willard says, belief is the readiness to act as if what you believe is true. You believe something when your whole being is ready to act as if that something is so. There's a part of James that I wrestle with too, where it says, do you believe that Jesus was who he said he was? Do you believe in God? And James's answer is, even the demons believe those things. Like Mother Teresa, like Peter Rollins, like for us, the questions come in the action. It's okay to doubt. It's okay to question. It's okay to tackle those things. It's okay to ask all of those pieces. It's okay to write to spiritual directors and say, I can't find God. I don't know what's going on. I'm not sure. And it's also okay at the very same time to love well, to act as if it's so. It's our actions that really signify our beliefs. It's the action and the practice. This week, as we go kind of from this space, my prayer and our challenge is that a faith family to wrestle like Thomas, to doubt like Thomas, and to hear me say in that moment, it's okay. I have questions, and brothers and sisters, as your pastor who God has kind of put in this place for this time, I wrestle with these same things. I don't have all the answers. I don't have them. I just want to be with you along the journey, and maybe it lead us a few steps by a few steps. Maybe we can wrestle together and try our best to answer the questions that we have before us. Maybe it's time to stop being afraid of a new opinion or a different way, but to engage. My prayer is that along that journey, we too will hear the words of the resurrected Jesus, that terrifying and unexpected thing that happened to Thomas, that we too will hear those same words that invite us to, Jake, come with me. I know those questions. Put your hand in my side. Let me meet you in this moment. I'm not going to get rid of it or tell you that your questions were bad or that you shouldn't have them. I just want to meet you in the middle of that. So in that moment, you can stop doubting a little bit and put a little bit of life back together and go forward until the next question and the next moment. Because what Jesus says to Thomas is stop doubting and belief and move to action. Love the way I've asked you to. Forgive the way I've asked you to. Put these things into practice. And you'll see that the doubting is a continual process. And the believing and the putting into practice is a continual process of transformation and of change. And I think that's what honest faith looks like. And so I'm thankful for the witness of Thomas this week and that story as we move towards Pentecost. Let me pray. Holy Spirit, I am just simply praying for the courage to let some things die, to challenge, to question, to doubt, to deconstruct, to wrestle. I'm praying that you would help everybody who's listening in this space to write down the questions that they need to wrestle with. That God, where were you when this happened? God, why is this? What about this? That they would wrestle and they would journal and they would find time for you to answer in whatever format you want to answer. For Thomas, it was a hand in the side. I'm praying that we would spend time in that darkness and wait lovingly and patiently and trustworthy for you to answer. And be okay if you don't. And Lord, help us to put into practice, to stop doubting and believe in this moment what we know to be true, just like Mother Teresa continued to do. We pray these things in your name. Amen.